Well, hello and welcome to Association Transformation. I don't know what episode this is. I mean, we're in what, season 3, 4, 5? Where are we?
Season 4.
Wow. We should release trailers. I don't know about you, but I just saw the Mandalorian trailer. I think we should start doing trailers for each season.
God, here we go, nerdy. We've got nerdy Elisa on today.
Okay, sorry. I'll put the nerd hat.
I thought the Mandalorian had finished. I thought it was done.
No. All right, let's just focus. Okay, we've got a great guest and a great topic. You've already derailed my nerd talk. So I'm very excited. A new friend of mine. I've recently, through some client work, been introduced to the world of hardwoods and forests and trees. And it's an amazing space, an amazing industry and profession. And I'm really excited today to introduce Terry Baker, the CEO of the Society of American Foresters. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely.
And I am also excited about the next new season of The Mandalorian. So
you're
not nerding out alone.
You're on your own, right? That's it. You're on your own. I'm done.
It's all right. Andrew is often the third wheel in these conversations. It's fine. It's fine.
You know, as long as you know your role, that just makes things flow much smoother.
That's great. So Terry, welcome to Association Transformation. We are this now global podcast conversation, kind of pushing some of the topics that others may not want to touch, or innovating in areas others aren't ready. Andrew, of course, is Chief Development Officer with Elevated. I am Elisa Pratt, Chief Strategist with Brewer Pratt Solutions, and we are excited to welcome you. How long have you been on the job? Tell me a little bit about your timeline.
Sure. So I have been the CEO of the Society of American Foresters for about 4.5 years now. And I came from the forestry space. So I worked for the U.S. Forest Service for almost 20 years right out of college before coming into this role, and worked in various forester and leadership roles with the Forest Service before. Someone saying, have you thought about being the CEO of SAF? And I told them absolutely not. And so it was definitely one of those things that I did not expect. And it has been quite the journey and the exciting experience that I've come to truly enjoy since then. So,
well, and Andrew and I, with our ears to the ground in the nonprofit and association world, we always hear these discussions, debates, if you will, as to who makes the best CEO, who makes the best chief staff executive. Should they come from the industry that the organization represents? Should they come from this trained and high caliber association management type professional, this world of trained nonprofit executives? And you're a unicorn. I mean, you come from the space, you've survived some pretty hard years and are now working to push change amongst people who used to be your peers. I don't know how you've made it through with everything going on, but I feel like you let us think that maybe the answer is execs coming from industry.
That is well, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. But I would start off with saying I would really attribute it to, my favorite leadership term, and it depends. When it comes to should it be an executive from the association space versus from the actual industry, and I say it depends because there's so many factors that come into play, as you both know, like coming into the world of associations from the forestry industry, especially from the federal government. I often tell people these two things are not the same in so many ways, and so I think part of what really helped me was coming in, yes, with quite the leadership background, but also being humble about it and being respectful about this whole dynamic and what it meant, and that there was an entire industry around associations and how they are managed compared to just coming in as like, well, I'm good at forestry, so I should be good at it as an association executive. So I think that was a big piece of it for me stepping into this role. And I'm also someone that I think, I'm not blunt, brutally honest, but I'm definitely a pragmatic, honest, straightforward person when it comes to certain conversations. And so in talking with my board of directors, as I stepped into this role, I was very, very clear in a couple of things. One was that it was my job to push back on them professionally and respectfully. And two, that when it came to how the organization was going to run and what we were going to do and what we're trying to do, based off of some of the challenges they had with the previous executive, I told them flat out, like, I know I'm digging out of a hole that I didn't create. And you can tell me how much you like me, and I don't take it personally, but the reality is there's a broken trust between the board and the executive, and I have to fix that. So those were some of the things that I really came into this being really thoughtful about, that not operating from the space of coming in and that I knew all the answers, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think it's interesting, Terry, when you say, you came from industry, but you were aware that the association management or association leadership is a very different proposition, and that it does require a different skill set or specialty skill set. It's interesting, it's refreshing, it's in a good way that somebody from industry does recognize that. You can imagine that a lot of time colleagues are struggling with the kind of their own professional recognition as an association specialist. I'm curious, how were you aware of that? And I know that sounds like a ridiculous question, maybe. How did you know that this profession existed?
So I did not know a lot of details. I think first and foremost, I would say that. But what I was a member of this association for those 20 some odd years, and I worked with staff. I volunteered quite a bit nationally with the organization. So there was those little like tidbits, I think, that I picked up around, okay, there's nuances to this, and absolutely where there's a benefit of having folks come from industry who understand the culture of that profession and how it works and all those types of things. But there has to be a balance there with like what it means to run an association. It's not fully, I mean, it's a business, but people don't think of it as a business. There's all these different nuances to it. And so it wasn't something that I was, hyper aware of, but it was one of those things that just as I thought about it in general and definitely stepping into it and doing a little research on my end, you're like, okay, this is a different world. And honestly, to an extent, what really was important to me was like in my own profession, there are a lot of folks who are like, oh, well, I'm a plumber during the week, but I'm a forester on the weekend. Like, no, you're not really a forester, but in that same sense, the same respect that my profession oftentimes looks for, I wanted to carry that same respect into this role as an association executive. So I think that was a piece of it for me as well, in recognizing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other rule that you broke here, and I know Andrew and I, every time we hear this, we groan, where the new CEO has come from the membership, was a board member or was a member. I mean, that makes this also, makes you that unicorn that we're so excited to get to know. You also mentioned a recognition of what wasn't working with the previous executive. And I'm guessing that the board, maybe they weren't fully aware, but you used that candor and that humility to help them understand what wasn't working.
Yep.
In our conversations and getting to know you, I consider you a change agent. Was the board ready for that? Did they have any idea kind of how far the organization needed to go to get back on the right track?
I don't think they really fully understood, because I think that there were those pieces that they were aware of and there were those pieces that they weren't, and which, I mean, that's just life with a board and with an executive, I think. And so because when I came in and I just started digging into things, it was a mix of being short-staffed and staff attrition that had occurred over the time prior to my arrival, with interims and everything else, and the unsurety of where the organization was going. And so there was this piece of it being really like, here you go, we're the board, we're in this together. So here's, what I know, and here are the challenges that we're facing. And it was one of those things, again, to kind of get folks out of the mentality of where they had been, where, is he telling us everything or is he not? Does this make sense? And really kind of just how you pair together the work that needs to happen, and how you make it relatable. I guess that's probably my biggest thing, is how I make it relatable. So oftentimes I would discuss with them, and it was just like, you come to me with member complaints. That is, either some of them may be your own or some of them may be from the membership, but that's what you come to me with. And like, it's my job to have us staffed and ready and able to start to reduce those complaints. Like, that is a big component of it. And so relating it personally to them, because again, they're talking with their peers and they're getting complaints from their peers. Now, again, we know that no organization will ever be staffed to make everyone happy, but some of these kind of core things that are coming up, they're repetitive, and really kind of linking it back to like their experience as a board member. And like, if everyone's just harping on you and you're a volunteer, that's, why am I volunteering? So it's that whole piece that I look at it as, I'm here to make your lives easier as well. And so that definitely started to resonate with folks. Definitely, sharing what was going on or where some of the big pinch points were, and just making it very real for them. Like, here is where we are. And if we want to stay in this place, we can stay in this place, but things are just going to get worse. If we want to make it better, we're going to need to invest. We're going to need to bring people onto the team. And that team, in my mindset, kind of getting back to this industry versus association, I hate to say it's versus industry and association, or association and industry, depending on who wants to be first. I think that there should be a balance. So I've been really intentional about there being a balance amongst staff. We're almost half and half of folks who have, some level of forestry or natural resource background with various association skill sets, and then folks that come, purely from an association or specialized skill set to help run that. Because, I've heard from my members like, oh, I run our membership at the state level. I'm like, you do, but it's not the same as trying to run a national membership organization from a membership perspective. And so respecting that and being thoughtful about which positions make sense to have, that we can lean on that forestry natural resource background, and which ones we really need someone who knows the association side of the business.
So we're really talking about association plus industry. I think you're right to note that versus that's confrontational, that embodies conflict and competition. I like industry plus association. Yeah. I think it's important to highlight that balance that you speak of, and that it's complementary and not, hopefully isn't adversarial.
Well, you say that, but invariably, I agree with you.
Right, that's ideal. I mean, we know how
that's ideal. Exactly.
Because the reality is, you're trying to, and it's interesting, we've touched on this a few times in the last few pods we've recorded. I feel that we've spoken about this. You're right, we don't want adversarial, but we are in a situation where in the association world, you are trying to marry two always distinct professions and push them into the same leadership space, and trying to get them to speak the same language and understand the same language and prioritize equally is a massive challenge. And I'm curious, just to help me understand, forestry in the US, is it your members, are they all public sector, or is there a mix? Is commercialization, is commercial members as well, people who are working in for-profit environment as well, aren't they? Yeah, okay, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, because I think, I'm really interested in the piece you said, we've got to run like a business, because we are a business. We are, just because we're not paying it back out to shareholders, but we are a business. We still got employees, still got legislation, regulation, bills to pay, products to put out the door. So when now that you've had time, a nice chunk of time to reflect on, your experience, and you've been in now doing the role for 4.5 years, was the association world, has it materialized more or less as the nightmarish wonderland that associations are, or was it better or worse than you'd anticipated when you came into the job?
Nightmarish wonderland. Wow, what a setup!
Perhaps that's just me getting tired.
No, that is quite the descriptor, and it's I think that when it comes to the world of associations, it's just, I like I mentioned, I didn't know what to expect. And so I think the piece of it for me was there are certain things that were definitely shocking, I guess is the best way to put it. But I think what really helped was, as I started to really kind of make my way into the association world outside of my organization, is that I found that some of these things weren't unique to us. So as we all know, that ability to have connections with other executives or other professionals within associations or within any specific community, that helps you feel like you're not going crazy. Like this is the reality of being in this type of role. Yeah. So that really helped. But that was was definitely a struggle in the first, probably first year, because there was so much I needed to do internally, where I was just like, is this normal? This doesn't seem normal. Why is this running this way? As you mentioned, trying to force kind of two perspectives in a sense. And I don't know if I'd say that there's a unifying language or speaking with the same language. I think there's a unifying context. Like, how do you describe things? How do you frame things in a way where people can pull from it what they need to, like, okay, we're in the same space. Because you're right, the languages are two very different things, in the grand scheme of things. And then I'll share with you probably one of my favorite things that I kind of developed, and I work with my board on quite often, is I like to call them puppy proposals. And this is one of my favorite things, and this is something that I think resonates with every association professional, and that is a board member like, we should do, this wonderful thing. We should have, we should make this free for all students, or we should invite, or pay for young professionals to go do this, or we should, all these wonderful things. And I literally frame them as puppy proposals, because ultimately when I say that we shouldn't do that, it sounds like I hate puppies. And no one wants to say that they hate puppies. So people, like, oftentimes they vote for it because they don't want to say that they hate puppies. And now you find yourself in this place, like you mentioned, as a business, now you have to pay for something that is in no way, shape, or form part of the budget. You have to put, some level of governance structure, some level of support around something that again sounds good. It sounds warm and fuzzy, but how do you actually make it happen? And so I think that is one of the dynamics that I think is really critical. But to an extent, as non-confrontational as possible, bringing those things to light, and you're like, is this a puppy proposal? And they just kind of, folks kind of sit back and they're like, yeah, it's a puppy proposal. Like, there's this piece of, like, how do you get people to own the reality of what it means to come up with this great idea that then someone has to make reality, that oftentimes you don't think of when, again, you're a volunteer and you're just like, this sounds wonderful. And I would have loved if this was this way when I was a student. You're like, there's a reason why it wasn't, and why it still isn't. So that's my cue for the day, is the puppy proposal.
That's well, and then no one has to be the bad guy, because you've framed it in a way that everyone kind of gets it. That's great. I would say, coming from the member side and the industry side, do you think the board had higher expectations for you, or do you think you got a longer or shorter kind of honeymoon period? They knew you were a known entity. Someone even, had spoken to you about it, and you said, heck no, but here you are. What do you think, coming from that place, meant for the expectations that were placed on you and your honeymoon period?
I don't know if I really had a honeymoon period, to be totally honest.
Well, you sure as heck didn't have one during COVID, I'm sure.
No, yeah, definitely. It was one of those things where I'm not sure if I would say it was a honeymoon period, but I think that, the way that things, and I don't know all the details, and I don't want to know the details, the separation of the previous executive to me definitely, like I mentioned, had people on edge. My context, or my thought of, like, digging out of a hole that I didn't create. And so I think there was a want for it to work. There was a hope that things would be better, because I understood, the membership, and that I understood the culture. But I don't know if there was a ton of thought put into, there's thought put into, like, what they would hope would be successful, but not necessarily, I think, specifically from my chair. It wasn't so much like, okay, well, we expect him to do these things in this amount of time. It was really one of those things where it's just like almost fix it. Like, we don't, like, it was that kind of piece of, we don't know where to start. And which I think there's a bit of a dynamic there, because, there's that piece of having someone who knows associations, knows how to run, a business, all those things, that you could come into an organization that was having some challenges and really kind of take over and set everything up, and let's move forward. And then there's a flip side of myself, where you had someone who understood the programs, who understood the personalities of the membership, those types of things, and that could, I guess, make it feel more like they're being brought along versus they're being told what to do. And so I think that was really helpful for me. But in regards to, like, what was my time frame or my honeymoon period, I don't know if it existed. It was just like, the building's for sale. you need to hire some people. Here's where the budget is, and make it all work or make it all better. So it was quite the introduction.
So did the board intentionally, when they were recruiting to your position, did they intentionally go out and look for somebody from the industry?
They did, and that was because,
okay.
well, so I think that was a bit of a reaction because my predecessor came from the association world and didn't have a connection to forestry. And I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was an intentional look for someone from the association world.
So this pendulum just swings back and forth and back and forth.
How much, I mean, that's interesting, because how much is that really to do with professional background, and rather, is it just to do with personalities? Because I mean, Elisa and I've worked in many different associations. Neither of us are specialists in the industry in which those associations work, but we've been able to develop a knowledge at the relevant level of the industry in which the association exists. But what do you think? Do you think it was just a personal issue as opposed to a professional issue?
I do think it has a lot to do with personality. I do think if someone comes in with, and I would assume that both Andrew, you and Elisa are the same in this, in that if you approaching association work, especially from a level of being a certain level of being humble and a certain level of respecting the profession that, whatever the association's profession or trade is associated with, then you're good to go. But I think, if someone is coming in with a personality where it's almost, you don't know what I do and let me tell you what I do, then it's going to rub people the wrong way. And so I think it has a lot to do with personality versus, industry or association. I will say, though, if you have someone who understands associations or has at least somewhat of a background in association and the industry, then obviously that's the best of both worlds, because you have that ability to, there's not a ton of on-ramp related to your ability to understand the culture of the profession and how people see things and how they respond to things. Like literally just messaging, like knowing that mentality of how folks are going to respond to things is massive, and when it comes to communications. And so knowing that up front is a huge benefit, especially if you're going to be building out a staff versus having a long entrenched staff that knows all those things already. So I think it is much more to do with personality than it does necessarily which side you come from.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, and there's not a lot that Andrew and I do agree upon, but I think you're right in that humility, that respect for the other side, if you will, and what you don't know. I think we both would stand behind that type of approach and that type of statement.
I'm going to disagree on that statement.
We agree on that, right?
We agree on a lot of things.
I mean, normally you're way out in left field and I have to rein you in.
It's called I'm innovative. I'm innovative, that's all. I'm just pushing the
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah,
what did you say?
I'm just like an incubator for innovation. That's all.
Innovative. Okay.
Innovative.
Innovative. What?
Oh, look, right. We're not going to get into this now, right? Not live on it.
Okay, right. Back to Terry. So, this is, it's interesting. We talk about these kind of phases and this pendulum swinging back and forth and reactions after different chapters in the organization's history. This is 100+ organization.
Yes.
And, so not, there's quite a bit of water under the bridge. And, the Society of American Foresters wasn't, you mentioned a hole to dig out of. You had to sell a building. You had to rehire. I mean, you were kind of thrown into it. I mean, why'd you take this job? What were you thinking? What were you thinking, Terry?
Oh, I get asked this question so much. Well, and you two are doing something that I became quite aware of early on in my time in this role, as I'd meet various folks from the association space, and I'd start, they'd ask me kind of what was going on, how the job was doing, and I would, just kind of give them a rundown of like these, what was going on, and they were like, how long have you been in the association space? And I'm like, oh, at that point it was like 2-3 months, and then they just start laughing at me. They were just, it was just like, it was, this uncontrollable laughter of like, my goodness. And they're like, this is your first association job? I'm like, yes.
That long? My God, you made it 3 months. Wow.
Made it 3 months. So why did I take this job? There's a variety of reasons. One, obviously, I wasn't aware of all the challenges that the organization was facing. I'd been a member, like I mentioned, for about 20 years, and a lot of my professional success I attributed to my engagement with the Society of American Foresters and the ability to serve on national committees and engage, academic programs across the country, as well as being able to engage leaders within the U.S. Forest Service that were from completely different parts of the country that I was working in, and that, in turn, related to new job opportunities and things of that nature. So there was just so much that was tied into SAF for me. And so when I was asked about the position, there was a few different things that came up. One was the opportunity to, well, let me rephrase that. My career with the Federal Forest Service was on a very good trajectory, I guess is the best way I would describe it, and very exciting. And so the thought of leaving was really significant. And the thought process of this particular role came to a couple of different factors, but one of the main ones was the opportunity related to representation. I'm a Black man in America, and I'm a Black forester, and there aren't many of us. And there's such a huge part of this for folks that relates to what they see. And I want, my profession to be seen in a way that it is one where people of color can be successful and be in the highest levels of leadership and help influence so much across our forests and our natural spaces. And so that was a big part of me wanting to step into this role and be able to engage on a national platform to do that. From that personal piece. And then it was also just to help the organization and the profession be better in general. What can I do to step into this role and help make a difference? That's always been kind of how I've approached my career. So it was an unexpected thing to be brought to my attention. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt like if I were selected, that I could, help make a difference. And so that's why I applied. And 4.5 years later, I'm still here, hoping that I've made somewhat of a difference over that time. And like you mentioned, help steering a 123-year-old organization is not something you do quickly, but we're making changes and definitely seeing results from it. So it's so far, I think it's been a good move. Now, don't ask my wife that question, because she will tell you about all the nights coming home being exhausted and all the stress associated with that. But we're still making it happen.
So are you a forester, or are you an association management professional? What is your, I know how you're going to answer this, by the way. I just know what the answer is. But, I guess, or more to the point, I mean, you and I hope you have a long and continue to have a productive career with the organization. But, after this, what are you do you think, well, actually, I'm in this profession now, this is who I am? Or am I going back to the forestry world?
It's a great question. I have no idea. I'm not really sure which direction my career might go after this role, because it is a bit of for me, it's unique, because, there's definitely that piece of being a forester and being on the ground, being engaged in that work, versus looking at the world of associations and what that looks like, and learning more. I mean, it's very fascinating, but would I necessarily go to another association role? I don't know. And I think even with that, would it be another association role outside of forestry natural resources? Like, that's even its own other question for me. So because there's that tie there that's really meaningful for me, that brought me to this role. So it's a great question, and the answer is simply, I have no clue. And it's, I'll figure it out, I think, as time passes and things come up. But a lot of good work left to do here, so not in a huge rush to take off, and we'll see what happens. But there's that piece of, I think for me, there's a piece of just overall leadership that is just really critical to me, and part of why I ended up in leadership roles in general, because I worked for some challenging leaders, and I saw the impacts to the staff, not only professionally but personally. And so that's something that's just extremely meaningful for me. So that piece of being able to go to a place and create a culture that helps people be successful and feel supported is probably paramount, no matter where it is or what it looks like. So, yeah.
Well, Terry, given where you are, 4 years in, congratulations again,
Thank
and
you.
embracing this role you're in and this passion that you have for this organization. What's that one piece of advice that you would leave us with here for the new CEO coming from industry or coming from membership? Looking back on all that you've learned and survived, what's that one main piece of advice you'd want to give?
The main piece of advice that I would give above all else is find your peer network, find your confidants, find your mentors. Having someone, the being at the top of an organization, the infamous saying, "It's lonely at the top," is so true in so many different ways. And so having someone or a couple of people that you can go to one, I think it's actually separate. I think it's different people. So there's people that you can go to where you can truly just be yourself, that you can sit there and just rant and get it out of your system and be able to be brutally honest about what challenges you are facing. And I would say that person is rarely your spouse. So again, probably not the person to bring that home to.
Right.
The other person that I think is a good peer or mentor of sorts, I think, or advisor, is someone who understands the role that you are in, that you can have very honest conversations and give you good feedback about your work in the role. Like that ability, like I mentioned, the ability to, as I like to say, like to know that you're not crazy. It's like, well, I did these 3 things and this is a response from staff. Am I crazy? Because again, you're making these decisions in so many ways in a vacuum. And so to have someone that you can bounce those things off of and say, and they're like, no, you're pretty good. That's what you needed to do, and you did it. So those would be my 2 things. Find someone that you can really just, as you can see from my flowing locks, let your hair down, and find someone that truly understands that you can really bounce things off of, because they know what the work is, they know what the challenges are from a very broad context, and they can give you some good feedback and keep you grounded. Because again, in these roles, there's power dynamics at play, and folks will sit there and tell you you're doing great work, and you're like, no, I'm not, and I know I'm not, but folks aren't going to be honest with you because of the position of power that you're in. So having folks that give you that really honest feedback and keep you grounded, I think, is the key, because so much of this work is about who you are versus your immense technical talent. So.
Well, Terry, you're now a member of the Association Transformation family. So we are here for you. We're also great at brutal honesty. So anytime.
I noticed. I have definitely noticed.
That. Yeah, she's very good at that. Yeah.
But seriously, we so appreciate you joining us. It's been an amazing run, the beginning of hopefully a very long run, and you are a unicorn. We so appreciate your perspective, and I think it's been a very helpful one for the larger association community, because no organization is the same, and every leader comes from somewhere, and your journey is one that I think a lot of people can learn from. So yes, you are absolutely a member of the Association Transformation family. We're good listeners too.
Excellent.
So thanks for joining us, and thank you to everyone for joining us for this episode of Association Transformation. We encourage you to make us one of your favorites wherever you get your podcasts, and we will talk to you next time. I don't know, Andrew, you got anything to sign off on? You good?
No, I'm all good, thanks. Sorry, you.
I never throw it to you. That's why I did.
Oh yeah, well, we're on. No, I don't know how to finish these things. Go on, you carry on.
All right, stop. All right, yeah. Well, that was a test. All right, you're not ready for closing.
Not yet.
But thanks for joining us, and until next time, we encourage you to put your members and your mission first.